What is going on? AIS 11905, Ethnic Experience United States. You all have been phenomenal people. We're at week 4. I just want to say it's truly an honor. It's really a remarkable experience to be able to get to learn from every single one of you. Just going through all your responses, a lot of the common words there, just eye-opening. I never knew this before. Just getting a chance to talk about these things and learn about these things. So again, it's just been truly an honor to be able to learn from you. I know it's cliche, but I mean it just in terms I've just been able to learn so much from each and every one of you. It truly is an honor. So let's get into it, people. As we're talking about this week, as we are moving right along here, again, we are right now week 4. And this week's article, we're talking a little bit about African-American history, Black history. And today, this article is written by Dr. Malana Karenga, and his name in different African languages, which you'll learn in the videos for this week, means master, teacher, and keeper of wisdom. So Dr. Karenga here wrote the article in 2010. And again, I know some of the articles can be pretty long here. You're gonna get as much as you put into this class, so definitely read as much as you can. I would definitely encourage you to, for sure, try to read the introduction, try to read the last paragraph, try to read the headings and bold words and quotes where you can. So let's move through it together here. So offering this concept, looking specifically at African-American history and the contributions towards this country, and looking at this side as we pull up the correct article here. So my fault. But that was another article written by Dr. Karenga. This one as well too is written by Dr. Karenga, and it's from 2010. So here's the correct article. Thank you for your patience, people. Here we go. We're getting back into it. Here we are. So with Dr. Karenga's article here, talking a little bit about just a specific focus on Black history, and reading this quote here from Dr. Karenga. Malcolm X reaffirms the centrality of history to the study of social reality in his statement that, quote, "Of all our studies, history is best prepared to reward our research." So looking specifically at what Dr. Karenga is talking about when talking about Black history. And this section is very, very, just in terms of like, talk about those things of eye-opening, or just before I had taken this class or learning from Dr. Karenga, in terms of just how far back these ancient civilizations in Africa go. And some of these civilizations, they're talking about 10,000 years ago, humans began to establish civilizations and these alternatives to hunting and gathering, allowing more time to lay a basis for expanding cultural development. So around this time, 8,000 BCE, before the Common Era. So we're going to look at many different civilizations in Africa that just with a deep, long history over 8,000 years, over 10,000 years ago, 8,000 BCE. Some of those include the Nile Valley civilization, moving forward in history to Nubia, then goes to pre-Kerma, Napata, Aro, and it keeps going through here to Egypt. And just looking at the legacy. I remember one of the things when I was really struck hearing Dr. Karenga talk about this is to imagine people thousands of years ago just to be on the Nile and be talking about philosophy and art and culture and just really philosophizing, as he says, just to be, what it's like to think about the human beings, these people as well too, having these conversations. So a deep, rich history as well too, and then goes on to talk about some of the Western Sudanic civilizations, the Moorish Empire in Spain. Really interesting here in terms of the Olmecs as well too. There's this interesting article, book, talk about Ivan Van Sertima's They Came Before Columbus, 1976. In this major and controversial book, Van Sertima argues that not only that Africans were here before Columbus, but they helped build the Olmec civilization, the parent civilization of all subsequent ones in Mesoamerica. And it noted here that they built their own ships, these African people, as early as 1200 BCE, so almost 3,200 years ago or so, and followed by voyages between 800 to 700 BCE, and again in 1311 and 1312 CE, current era, so Common Era. So going along here to just talking about how the different evidence that shows the African involvement in these different civilizations, specifically the Olmec people. This section as well too, it just talks about the importance of phrasing, the importance of words. Dr. Karenga talking about the Holocaust of enslavement and why these words are chosen, why these specific words are chosen, as opposed to what Dr. Karenga would talk about when we just say the word slaves, you're really dehumanizing people. You're really putting this identity onto people and saying, well, this is who they are. But it says, no. There's many different people who've been taken as enslaved peoples throughout history. And this is one specific example of the Holocaust of enslavement. So enslaved people, so it's saying that they're not, it's not a natural state, it's a state that people are put in as enslaved peoples. So it talks about the Holocaust of enslavement and the impacts of enslavement as well too, and what that has on the lives and livelihood of different peoples as well too. And then also looks at the resistance to enslavement. So yes, that this occurred, and also there's a response. We talk about those modes of resistance and modes of response, and resistance being one of those options as well too. So there's a cultural resistance, day-to-day resistance, abolitionism, emigrationism, is this push for people to emigrate back to Africa or go elsewhere where Africans could be free and self-determining. Armed resistance, some examples of that, and we talked about a little bit last week at the end of it, but some examples would be this Native American and African American alliances as well too. And this can be seen as well in Florida. In no other Native American nation or ethnic groups were Africans treated with such difference, and did they rise to such leadership roles in politics and war. As early as 1738, enslaved Africans began to regularly escape from South Carolina, taking refuge among the Creeks or Seminoles in Florida. In fact, it can be argued that the Seminole Nation developed early into an Afro-Native American nation jointly controlled and run by Africans. So some of the crossover we have between some of the different ethnic groups we're talking about. Then Dr. Karenga here talks about Civil War and Reconstruction. So the impact of that as well too, that just because people were no longer enslaved peoples didn't mean that life was automatically given this equal treatment, or they did not face many different obstacles or face different prejudice and discrimination as they did. So it talks about this as well too, and talks about as well Reconstruction. One thing I want to point out as well, so just going back here when we're talking about the different form of abolitionism, people fighting for rights to no longer be enslaved peoples, it's important to talk about Harriet Tubman. And it's noted that Harriet Tubman had made many trips, at least 19 trips to the South. So pretty amazing when you look at the life of Harriet Tubman in terms of taking people to freedom. So going along here, going back to the Civil War and Reconstruction here. So moving forward, talk about different things, the Great Migrations and Urbanization. You can read more about that. The Black Women's National Club Movement. An important note to hear that we talk about feminism, this notion that women are getting the same treatment and same rights as men. There's also a movement, what's called womenism. It's this notion for women's rights, particularly for Black women's rights, for African American women's rights, for women of color, particularly for Black women. And there's this example when many of these women who were fighting for women's suffrage, fighting for the right to vote, which would later be the 19th Amendment in 1920. But leading up to this, many different leaders, they're at this convention, and Sojourner Truth is there as well too. And Sojourner Truth wanted to speak. She's an African American and Black woman. Many of the other people who were European American women did not want her to speak. They didn't want it to be about race. They wanted it to be about gender. And Sojourner Truth gives this famous speech called "Ain't I a Woman?" and talking about that as well too. So this notion of womenism, the fighting for equal rights for Black women as well too, for women of color. But you can look at some of the historical points here of Black women's national club movements. And there's many different organizations and movements that happened during this time. The Niagara Movement, the NAACP, and Urban League. We talk here about accommodationism, confrontation, and Black nationalism, some of these different responses. Black science and inventions. And again, you'll watch this in about a half-hour long video. That's one of the weekly listed videos. Just talking about different inventors. So for instance, if you ever use shampoo for your hair, well, then you can thank George Washington Carver, who invented that. If any of you ever have a cell phone, I believe you might. I have one of those, invented by a Black inventor as well too. If any of you ever played golf out there before in your life, if you ever used a golf tee, it's invented by a Black inventor as well. Many different things. If you ever stopped at a stoplight before, you can thank Garrett Morgan for that, for stopping at stoplights, a stoplight invented by a Black inventor. And then also you can thank it for those gas masks, especially this was big during World War I, when there was like a lot of chemical warfare going on as well too, also invented by a Black inventor as well too. That'd be Garrett Morgan as well too. So there are many different inventors. You can read about these people for many different African American, for different Black inventors. They were not given their due justice when they were making inventions, as they were not seen as human beings with rights. They were seen as property of other human beings, awful and disgusting as it is to say, right? But these people were not given the proper rights, not proper recognition. So if they did invent something, sometimes they would not be able to patent this or not be able to go through the legal process. And some people would sell their patents, sell their inventions off to other people just to make something off of it, instead of just getting no credit whatsoever. For some other people too, if they had enslaved peoples, then if one of their enslaved peoples had created an idea that the master of this enslaved person made us take credit for the invention. So definitely, as we talk about acknowledging, educating, and honor being a huge part of this class, this is definitely something you'll be reading about here. And also you can, way to watch the video, just see a number of different inventions as well too. Crisis in the New Deal, talking about some of the different, moving through history here. Reaffirmation of the 60s, we're gonna get a little bit more into the civil rights movement, also what's called the human rights movement as well too, and some of the organizations that sprung up during that time as well too, and some of the different movements that happened and different activist movements. Look at the Black Power movement and some of those organizations like US, the movement created by Dr. Karenga. You also had the Black Panthers movement, the Black Panther Party as well too, just different organizations in response. The religious thrust, not just Christian, but Islamic as well too, and looking at different leaders, for instance, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Haji Malcolm would be someone who's a person of the Islamic faith and who's been to Mecca before as well too, and just looking at just the different response of using religion, whether it's Christian or the Islamic faith as well too, in response for this human rights movement. Cultural thrust, and we're going to talk about a political thrust, some of the political leaders as well too, and different people in the 60s and 70s, and moving through to a more common era. Post 60s here, the 80s, and just some more leaders and different movements for y'all to learn about, going through the 90s. It brings us up to where we are now in this new era as well. And before we look at that, there's this, looking at some of the, there's many different million people marches that have gone throughout history, especially for African-American people and different movements. There's, look at this one, the Million Youth March. The idea of the Million Youth March began with a problematic start. First, it proposed to be for New York by Min, Khalid Muhammad of the NOI, enforced in the community who disagreed politically. So just looking a little bit about what happened here. And a statement and stimulant for self-consciousness as Black men, Black women, and Black youth, and the responsibility of the community and struggle, which this implies and requires. Going here to the new era, looks at some of the elections, the presidential elections, Katrina and the aftermath as well too, in terms of people in New Orleans not getting the proper support they needed, especially from FEMA, which is supposed to be our response to emergency relief. HIV and AIDS crisis, police abuse and brutality, a number of different people here, a list off in terms of people who were shot and killed, and in terms of unarmed people, which obviously still happens many different times. You'll see different movements talk about say their name. Looking at people like Breonna Taylor or different people as well too. Obviously the George Floyd killing, that murder was something that was just very brutal and had the eyes and the attention of a lot of people here. But just how do they respond to that as well too, in terms of accountability and just people being treated as human beings, and not being senselessly killed for no reason as well too. Then goes on here to the historic presidential election of Barack Hussein Obama. And basically what Dr. Karenga makes an argument for here is to say, hey, that's great, we have made some progress, but by no means does this mean that we are done with racism in this country. As you saw, there were definitely a lot of responses since that election of Obama in 2010 as well, or before that, his election in 2008, but a lot of responses since then, since this article was written in 2010. But definitely appreciative of the wisdom of Dr. Karenga, who also created Kwanzaa. So if you're familiar with this international holiday, and yes, then Dr. Malana Karenga created that. If you have a chance to take Dr. Karenga as one of your instructors for your time here at the beach at Cal State Pavanga, I would highly recommend that. So that's a little bit of what we're looking at for the article today. I'm going to pull up the videos here of what you're going to be watching. So for week 4 here, you're going to be watching these videos right here. Looking again at Dr. Karenga speaking right here, the relevance of Black studies. And this film right here, the history of slavery in America, just seeing the atrocity of what this was like, the Holocaust of enslavement. Just hearing some testimonies of people who are either the descendants of or people who are just experts in the field who are studying this for their lives. Masters of Invention, looking at some different historical inventions, really important inventions from African-American, from Black inventors that maybe you have heard about, maybe you have not heard about. You'll learn more about those. Interview with Dr. Malana Karenga, looking more about the life of Dr. Karenga and listening to him speak about African-American history, Black studies, and then also continuing this, it's called A Dialogue with Black LA, Dr. Malana Karenga. So your homework here, your weekly asynchronous assignment here is, so you want to get participation points, is to respond with 3 to 7 sentences, as you all know how to do. You can also do your 30-second to 1-minute video, which y'all won't code. Thank you, Nonaida, for everybody who's doing that as well too. But more than welcome to use your words, however you feel comfortable expressing yourself. I look forward to learning from you. Thank you, everybody who's been responding so far. It's been really impressive. I think we have like 38 in the class right now, so it's just a handful of people more who need to do all the responses. But You all have been amazing people. You all are incredible. Honestly, it's just such a gift, such an honor to be able to learn from each and every one of you in this class. Thank you all so much for bettering yourself personally and professionally. My challenge for you as you hit the pillow tonight and go to bed is think about, what do you want to be someday? How do you want to change this world? If you could wave a magic wand, do anything you want in this world, change the world for the better, what would you do? If you could live like you could not fail, what would you do? You can do it, people. I believe in each and every one of you. I believe you. Yawanko, Lukwe'tiyó means thank you. I love you. Until next time, deeply appreciate every single one of you. Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.